This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. And this is what living looks like. And this is what freedom feels like. And this is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. And this is what living looks like. And this is what freedom feels like. And this is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. For fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God we praise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. For fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God we praise you. Whoa, we praise you. Whoa, we praise you. Whoa, we praise you. And I've tried so hard to see it. It took me so long to believe it. That you choose someone like me to carry your victory. Perfection could never earn it. You give what we don't deserve it. You take these broken things, raise them to glory. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won, no. And I am who you say I am. Crowned me with
get famous? Or maybe this is a good question. What would you want to be famous for? I know what I would want to be famous for. I would want to be on an American Ninja Warrior. I think that would be so much fun. I don't think I could even qualify for even the very first thing. I think I would probably fall in the very first try, but I think that would be a fun thing to be famous for. And our culture is enamored with the idea of getting famous, aren't we? You guys heard of TikTok? It's like the most downloaded app of 2020. And we went from having celebrities in our culture to having influencers. You know, celebrities were like athletes or people who are famous for being good at like singing or acting. But now we have influencers who are really just famous for being famous. It's like we have this increasing infatuation with being famous in America. And the funny thing is that's kind of a stark contrast from the life of like a Jesus follower. A Jesus follower doesn't live to make, I don't live to make myself famous. As a Jesus follower, I live to make Jesus famous. Someone who's really good at this is your pastor, Chase Fendell. He is not about getting himself up in fame or in notoriety. He's all about making Jesus famous. That's why instead of having more campuses of Anthem Church where he's on a screen, he actually is sending out church planners. You guys sent out church planners last Sunday, and then this Sunday you were commissioning our church in San Marcos, the Hills Community Church. And so I'll say this, if Chase is trying to get famous, he's doing it wrong. He is actually lifting up other church planners, other ministries. And a lot of people might think it's the competition that he's propping up. But the truth is, we are on the same team because we're all trying to make Jesus famous. And so when Anthem makes Jesus famous, it's a win. And when the Hills makes Jesus famous, it's a win. So we've been following the early church through the book of Acts. And this is actually the 23rd week that we're doing this. And so Acts 23 is where we'll be. And these people that we're following, many of them, most of them actually, gave their lives to make Jesus famous. So they're a great example for Jesus followers. And why would they, right? You might be thinking, you know, I'm cool to come to church, but I don't know if I'm ready to give my whole life to this thing. I don't know if I'm ready to die for this movement. And I can understand that, right? Like today I would love for us to ask this question, why would someone want to follow Jesus? And especially like if I'm not even making myself famous, I'm making Jesus famous. In fact, it's always really, there's hard things that come to Jesus followers. In fact, there's 260 million people who live in a part of the world where you can be punished just for believing in Jesus. They are in persecuted countries, and it's like, man, is it really worth it? I think that's a question that you should consider asking. Jesus said we should count the cost before we come and follow him. Just like someone counts a cost before they build a house, we should count the cost before we follow him. For me, I have counted the cost, and I'm all in. The answer is yes, it's worth it for me to follow Jesus. And I don't know where you're at on that journey, but I want to invite you to maybe even just ask that question this morning. Is it worth it to follow Jesus? What's the reward? And let me just fill you in on a secret. Being a Jesus follower almost always means doing a hard thing. So someone who is an expert at doing hard things was the Apostle Paul. We call him an apostle because he physically saw Jesus. That's what the title apostle means. And last week, Pastor Chase did an incredible job in Acts 22 and even some of Acts 23 where we're going to be today, talking about how Paul appealed to different tribes. He was actually born a Roman citizen, and so he was able to appeal to the Romans. He was raised to be a Pharisee in the Jewish culture, so he was able to speak to the Jews, and he spoke Aramaic, he spoke Hebrew, and he spoke Greek. And so he had 3 languages. God had uniquely gifted him to be able to reach all those people. And what Chase said, and I love this, is that God has uniquely gifted you to reach certain people. And man, that's so cool to think like your personality, your interests, where you live, where you were born, what you've been through will be able to reach people. And even though Paul was uniquely positioned to reach people, he still had incredible obstacles, always obstacles, right? And in a lot of parts of the world, you see these huge obstacles, people going to jail for following Jesus, people being killed for following Jesus. But the truth is there's external opposition and obstacles, and then there's internal obstacles. And I believe part of the reason we don't see more external obstacles in the U.S. is because we torment ourselves. There are so many obstacles for Jesus followers that are on the inside. Addictions, identity issues, pursuit of fame. I told you I'd love to be famous for American Ninja Warrior. But the truth is, I couldn't make it to the first obstacle because I'm not physically fit enough to even try, right? Like, I have been kept from trying to make the obstacle. I am actually the obstacle. I would have to do some real training and get myself to a place to even be able to start. And that's kind of how the internal obstacles are for following Jesus. It might encourage you to know that Paul dealt with this too. He had internal obstacles. And he gave a great prescription for like how to fight this in a letter that he wrote to the church in Corinth. He says this in 2 Corinthians 10, 3-6. He says, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does." It's not an outside battle, right? The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, we have divine power to demolish strongholds in our own hearts. We demolish arguments. How many times does your mind get in the way of you following Jesus? And we demolish every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. Have you ever thought, I know better? That's what a stronghold is, that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. I love that mentality that the things that come into my mind are actually under my control. I can take my thoughts and make them obedient to Jesus. You cannot control your feelings. I don't know if you've ever tried. Sometimes I do try to control my feelings, and they're very difficult to control. But I can tell my mind, no, that is not true. That's not a true thought. I'm going to take that thought captive, and I'm going to make it obedient to Christ. And obedience sounds like a harsh word, but the truth is just obedience is overcoming the obstacles within to follow Jesus. And that's what he wants. If you love me, you'll obey my commands. That's what Jesus said. And so the cool thing about that is once you overcome the obstacles within, you're ready to tackle the obstacles on the outside and be ready, because once you find freedom from that addiction, once you understand really who you are, that your identity is not in what you do or your past, your identity is the son and the daughter of the King. Once you realize that, be ready, because there's opposition coming. There's spiritual opposition coming from the outside. This is what happened to Paul in Acts 23. We're not going to read all of it because it is a ton of stuff. But first he got the Pharisees and the Sadducees to argue about the resurrection, because he said, I'm just saying that there is the resurrection from the dead. And Jesus resurrected. That's what he was talking about. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees disagreed about that. And so then, because they were about to tear him apart from that argument, they thought they would tear him apart. And so the Roman soldiers took him. And then it says God encouraged him. And it's like a little moment of like, that was nice. But then people were waiting to kill him. It says 40 men vowed to eat. And they vowed not to eat until he was dead. And so what happens next is Paul's nephew finds out. And he tells Paul in prison, because that's where they have him captive. And Paul is sent his nephew to the commander. And then the commander sends Paul with the letter to Claudius. So the commander writes this letter saying, hey, this guy, they're trying to kill him, but he hasn't really done anything worthy of getting killed. He hasn't done anything deserving death. Claudius is going to get this letter saying that from the commander of the Roman army. And then they take Paul and they stick him in Herod's palace, and that's the end of the chapter. He has to wait there for the accusers, these Jewish leaders who want to kill him, to come and have their case against him. And so here we are. It seems kind of all bad, right? I mean, it's okay. It's good that he's still alive. It's good, actually, that he got pushed more towards the ends of the earth, because, you know, if you go back to Acts, we've been doing this series. It's called Unstoppable, because the truth is the church is and always will be an unstoppable Jesus movement. And so you think about this. He was in Jerusalem whenever they first were trying to kill him. And then they took him to Caesarea. And then eventually they said, you're going to have to go to Rome. And so he's getting pushed more towards what was actually prophesied, that Jesus said, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria to the ends of the earth. And to them, Rome was really the ends of the earth. And so actually, even though it does seem all bad, he's getting closer to Rome, getting closer to death. And I just want to pause here and say, what will it cost you to follow Jesus? Because if you look at what it cost Paul, it's going to cost you a lot. It cost Paul his freedom, his comfort. It cost him a good standing with the people of influence in his community. He was mistreated. He was defensive. One time a guy was about to slap him, and he said, God will slap you, you whitewashed tomb. He was constantly playing defense. And I'm sure he was kind of burnt out, at least physically. And so why, right? Why would Paul do this? Why is it worth it to follow Jesus? I love the answer, because you actually have to backtrack a little bit to find the answer of why it's worth it to follow Jesus. You may have heard of heaven, right? Heaven is this great place where the roads are gold and everywhere is light. There's no darkness. There's no crying. You know, heaven has all these cool things happening. But the truth is, you don't have to wait for heaven to have a reward of following Jesus. Can I just let you in on a little secret of heaven? It's in this verse, chapter 11. It says, the following night, the Lord stood near Paul. God was with him. Paul felt the presence of God. And then Jesus said, take courage. He experienced God's presence. And God told him, take courage. And the cool thing is, if you look back at Jesus' life, there's this exact same phrasing that Jesus says, take courage, for I have overcome the world. And right before that, he says, in this world you will have trouble, but take courage, because I have overcome the world. The only reason, the secret about heaven is, the only reason heaven is so great is because God is there. Jesus is in heaven. And Paul didn't have to wait for heaven to experience the presence of Jesus. He got to experience it in that prison cell. You don't have to wait. Jesus is the reward. If you're thinking, what's the reward? Why is it worth it to follow Jesus? You get Jesus. Jesus is love. Jesus is peace. When he is with you, you have courage because he's overcome the world. There's no obstacle greater than Jesus. And the cool thing that happens right after Jesus tells him, take courage, is that he gives him his presence, and then he gives him a purpose. And that's true of you and me too. When you get God's presence, he always gives you purpose. God's presence leads to God's purpose. And so he says this next to him. He says, as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome. And I love how Jesus reminds him, like, you have testified about me. You have done this thing. He said, you'll be my witnesses all throughout the ends of the earth. And Jesus is telling him, you've done it. You have testified about me in Jerusalem. The whole reason Paul was there was to say, hey, this guy Jesus that was crucified, he didn't stay dead. He came back 3 days later and he rose. And through his resurrection, he defeated sin and defeated death. And now people who hope in him will have eternity with him. They will have life because he is alive. And so it's like what he's done in Jerusalem, he's going to do in Rome. He's going to take it to the ends of the earth. And I think that you and I could even follow this template. We can say, as you have testified about me in blank, so you must also testify about me in blank. And this is kind of similar to what Chase said last week. He said something about how Jesus transforms you. And so when you have a story about what Jesus has done, it transforms you and God works through that story. So what I'm saying is, as God has testified about you in one area, or as you have testified about him in one area, he's going to use you to testify in some other area. And the way this works is like, let's say you were a cynic or a skeptic at one point, and now you've said, you know what, I'm following Jesus. You are the best person to reach people who ask the hardest questions. Cynics and skeptics reach people with the hardest questions. Free people can free people who are enslaved to sin. Addicts are the best people to reach addicts. People who have identity struggles and have working through them, that you're the best person to reach someone who has an identity struggle. To finish out my message, I just want to tell you a couple things that are my hope for you. This may well be the last time that I've preached here at Anthem as part of the team, and the Hills is getting commissioned today, so I just want to say thank you for that. And there's 4 things that I want to say, like my hope for you as a church, and not even as a church, just as a person. This is my hope for you. Number 1 is that you will truly be a disciple. Not everyone can be a worldwide missionary like Paul and start churches all over the place, but everybody can be a Jesus-following disciple. The way we define disciple is from Matthew, when Jesus called Peter and Andrew and he said, hey, come follow me and I will make you fishers of men. So a disciple is following Jesus. Come follow me. A disciple is being changed by Jesus. He said, and I will make you. And then a disciple is someone who's committed to the mission of Jesus. He called them fishers of men. And so following Jesus, being changed by Jesus, and committed to the mission of Jesus. That's my first hope for you. I love a scene in the movie 300. King Leonidas is going to face Xerxes, which is a ruler of armies of thousands upon thousands of soldiers. Some even say millions. And King Leonidas only has 300 soldiers from Sparta. And he comes to this Greek army who is coming to help him. And they have a lot more people than 300, but they think, why would we join you? You only have 300 soldiers. You didn't even bring the whole army. And so Leonidas looks to the soldiers of the Greek army and he says, hey, what is your profession? And one of them says, well, I'm a potter. He says, what's your profession? Another one says, I'm a sculptor. He looks to another one and says, what's your profession? And he says, a blacksmith. And he looks back at his men and he says, Spartans, what is your profession? And they go, how, because every Spartan was a soldier. And my hope for you is that you are not just living your life with Jesus following being something you do on the side, but you are all in, following Jesus, being a disciple, following Jesus, being changed by Jesus, committed to the mission of Jesus for the rest of your life. That's my first hope for you. My second hope is that you would find freedom from whatever's holding you back. This is that obstacle within that we were talking about. If it's addiction or maybe even just apathy or depression, anxiety, battling self-worth. I experienced this in my life. I fought an addiction to pornography and have finally found freedom from it. And the way I found freedom was by letting it out into the light. And whenever I found a brother and we just started telling each other, confessing to each other, praying for one another. Jesus' brother James actually, he had a template for this. He said, confess your sins to one another and pray for each other that you'll be healed. I pray that you will be healed. You'll find that healing and let your struggle out into the light. It would be life-changing for you to find that freedom. The third thing, this is really quick. It is so fun to be generous. We love to say, do the most generous thing. My hope for you, maybe this is my last time teaching for a while at Anthem as we're going to start the Hills. Do something generous. Find someone who has a need and just come in over the top generosity. It's so fun. It is so fun to be generous. And the last thing, and really the most important thing, is that you would get to lead someone into a life-changing relationship with Jesus. At Anthem, we say that our mission is to help people encounter Jesus and experience life to the full. Life to the full. That's the mission. And so I hope that you can join in the mission. It doesn't have to be large scale, tons of people. It starts with one person. The way we change the world is actually just one life at a time. And so I hope that you will be able to lead someone into a life-changing relationship with Jesus. And the truth is, sometimes we actually think that the organization of the church is who is supposed to lead people into a life-changing relationship with Jesus. But I want to tell you, the organization of the church was never meant to lead people to Jesus. People lead people to Jesus. There's a lot of things that organizations can do. We believe in the organization of the church, but that's not the job of the organization of the church. That's the job of you, to lead people to encounter Jesus and experience life to the full. So I hope that for you. I hope that you're able to lead someone to Jesus. I hope you're able to do something incredibly generous, find freedom, and really just be a disciple, be all in as you walk with Him. May it be so rewarding, because as much as the obstacles are, the reward is even greater because God is with you. And that's what's going to bring the most satisfaction and fulfillment in your life. So let's pray. Father, thank you so much that just like Paul, we've got obstacles within and we've got obstacles on the outside too. But the reward of Jesus is so worth it. So I pray that we would chase hard after you, that we would be disciples. I pray that we would do something generous. I pray, Lord, that you would help us to find freedom, to bring whatever struggle we have out into the light and get help, and that we would lead people into a life-changing relationship with you. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.